We have stargazers.
We do?
Those are beautiful. Or are those stargazers?
Yeah.
Lilies.
You know.
Gorgeous. They're intoxicating.
Intoxicating.
Hi.
Hi.
This is a big session today.
This is a milestone.
Mm-hmm.
Number 50.
It's hard to believe.
Half a century.
Exactly. Thanks for staying with us.
Yes. We appreciate every single view and viewer. In our last session, 49, we got the famous contradictions letter from Sinnett, but it was the contradictions that he and Hume had been discussing for months, so-called contradictions.
Yeah.
KH said they weren't really contradictions because it was more a lack of complete information. And he basically proved that. He did admit that he, by accident, left out one word that would have changed the meaning of one of his statements. And so he said, to that, I plead guilty, but to the rest, not guilty. Hume had been claiming, according to Sinnett, that the Mahatmas were making up the doctrine as they went to cover up previous mistakes that they had made. That's how prophets do. When somebody calls them out on something that doesn't make sense, then they get a new revelation from their source and it fixes everything. He said this was especially in regards to the races. Well, KH reviewed all of the information and there was no discrepancy in any of that information. He even took it to their appeals court, one of the highest adepts that they deal with, and he only had a few suggestions.
But at the same time, there were some suggestions, and KH, being a humble teacher, took the suggestion, and he knows that he can make some modifications as the way he teaches these plebeian Westerners.
I don't have much faith in any person who claims to never make a mistake. And there are people who will never, ever admit to making a mistake. These Mahatmas are very ready to say, you know what, I didn't say that clearly. I could have done it better. That's who I want to work with. People like that who are humble, who don't have an ego to speak of. It makes an enormous difference. One of the things that we pointed out was that the Mahatmas have their own instruments for observation. They're called siddhis. And they can see far, far beyond what physical scientists can see with their most expensive instruments that have been invented. Not only that, but they have understanding. We're going to learn more today about how they come up with their doctrine. This is going to be another big revelation. We learned that almost everyone goes to Devachan. Before, he had intimated that it was only the kind people who went to Devachan, but he didn't really state that. It was our assumption, and Hume's and Sinnett's assumption, that that was the case.
Probably because we're just indoctrinated with Judeo-Christian ideas of good people go to heaven, bad people go to hell, and we're sort of equating Devachan with the heaven world, so that was our kind of assumption.
Right. We assume that there's one individual at the road that you take when you die.
And there's a fork.
And he either says, that way or that way. And it isn't quite that simple.
Who's the guy who judges?
Well,
not God himself. It's a
St. Peter is the keeper of the gate to heaven. So I assume that's who it is. I don't know. We also found out that KH's superiors think he's a ding-dong because he is willing to try to teach these two grown-up Western men who are imbued with all of their so-called enlightenment and have it deeply within their soul, not their real soul, but their being. And they think that that's crazy. They usually get their chelas when they are quite young, and when they have very little ego, and when they're very willing to learn something new.
Usually after many lifetimes of being exposed to it, and they're usually in Asian bodies, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was just looking at some photos this morning that I had taken when I was in Ladakh in Kashmir in 2006. And the people there are so simple, so kind, so unspoiled by Western ways of thinking and doing things. It's no wonder that those are the chelas that succeed.
Without belaboring it, I want to just make sure that everyone understands how important and kind of rare of a thing is that Terry is mentioning here. The fact that KH, the master we're listening to throughout this whole teaching, his teachers, his higher-ups, think he's a ding-dong for attempting to teach the Westerners. Let's make that clear. Like, this is what's going on here. His higher-ups, they could be like Buddha-level type of teachers, think that KH is silly for trying to teach these Western guys all this stuff because we're just so far removed from anything spiritual like this. That's very interesting.
And the other thing that we pointed out was that they're not authoritarian. His superiors didn't say, stop wasting your time, go do something that we tell you to do. They don't operate like that. If one of them has an idea that is meaningful, even if they don't agree with it, they may very well say, you know what, we're going to give you a chance to try it.
There are some strict rules, though, like how KH is restricted in using certain powers. There are some guidelines that he does need to follow, but for the most part, no, they're very open and willing to try.
And we also found out that he was allowed to use more of those special Mahatmic powers during the first phases of this correspondence. And as time went on, that ability got cut down. Why? Because they weren't responding very well. They weren't making enough progress to justify the expenditure of energy. Mm-hmm. And so they said, from now on, if you're going to continue writing to these guys, you have to do it yourself, and you have to not use any of your powers to do it. Pen and ink on paper. We learned a little more information about what shells are and how that operates. And if you still aren't clear on that, I really recommend that you go back to session 49 and review that part of it. We found out right at the end of the letter that KH was near Darjeeling. Where's Darjeeling?
In India.
It is. You have to look pretty hard to find it. It's way up in the north and to the east of India. And it's in a little insert that goes between Nepal and Bhutan. Tibet and India touch each other right there. So that's where he is, near Darjeeling, and we're going to find out more about that in just a few minutes. All right. With that, let's get to work on our next letter. And this is letter number 86.
My reply to Colonel Chesney in answer to his letter was already written and ready to be forwarded by my little man when I received yours, advising me not to correspond with him. Therefore, I forward it to you to read, and should you think it expedient, to deliver it to him. It seems rude to leave his letter without any acknowledgement whether he is or is not in sympathy with the movement.
And this letter was written, or received at least, in late September 1882. And we had had a slew of letters that was received during that time period. Colonel Chesney, remember, was a British officer in the military, and Sinnett was trying to convert him to theosophy. But in the meantime, Sinnett had received information from Colonel Chesney that he wasn't really interested.
But, good friend, I leave this entirely in your hands and pray you to use your own discretion in the matter. You ought to know that young Fern is decidedly a little humbug, and worse, a congenital, though often irresponsible liar. In his last letter, he tries to bamboozle Morya and make him believe that he, Fern, is a new adept in the making. He is testing us in every way and has a very strong influence on Hume, who he bamboozles with imaginary powers, whose aim is to supplant the brothers. Oh my gosh, really? He consciously wants to supplant?
He is a little troublemaker, and he's playing Hume because both of them are very skeptical, Hume more so than Fern, but Fern is actually manipulating Hume because he recognizes how easy he is to manipulate. So anyone who has a big ego is extremely liable to be manipulated by other people.
He made him believe indirectly that he belonged to a society whose name is unmentionable, a society that seeks no one, where one member doesn't know who the others are, nor will he know till the real nature of the brothers is made public, even though the system on which it works claims to preclude all deception. To Morya, he writes that he confesses he ought not to have put temptation in Hume's way, for having overestimated his strength, he has unwittingly caused him to fall. Wow.
He was testing Hume, and he shouldn't have because he thought he was stronger than he actually was, and now he caused him to fail.
Fern is at the bottom of much that has happened. Watch and beware of him. One thing is certain, though. This isn't the time for being severe on the offenses of the too indiscreet but half-faithful lay chelas. Half-faithful.
And that's the two Englishmen.
Now that Mr. Hume has alienated the Chohan and Morya, the Chohan being Morya and K.H.'s boss, basically, I remain alone to carry on the difficult work. You read Hume's letter. How do you like that huge shadow of a yogi with solemnly stretched out hand and defiant haughty eyes disavowing with contemptuous gesture the intent of hurting the society?
And I don't know if that was like a cartoon drawing or if it was something he described. It's not clear.
Let me echo your regret for the poor society, and before fading away again into the foggy distance between Shimla and Parijong, assure you of my ever-friendly feelings for yourself. K.H. Did I pronounce that right? Fari?
I'm not sure if it's Parijong or Parijong,
Okay.
so I should have looked it up, but I didn't. And then there's a P.S. to it.
P.S. Mr. William Oxley wants to join the eclectic. I'll tell HPB to forward his letter to you. Kindly write to him to say that he must not feel vexed at my denial. I know he is quite sincere and as incapable of a deception or an exaggeration as you are, but he trusts too much to his subjects. Let him be cautious and very guarded, and if he joins the society, I may help him and even correspond with him through you. He is a valuable man, and indeed more worthy of sincere respect than any other spiritualistic mystic I know of, and though I have never approached him astrally or conversed with him, I have often examined him in thought. Do not fail to write to him with the first steamer. What does that mean?
It means that he's in London, and they have regular ships
Steamer being a
that
ship.
carry the mail back and forth. So they all knew exactly when those ships arrived and left. So make sure it makes that next ship.
Okay. Signed KH.
So he mentioned he was going to be leaving to go into the foggy distance between Shimla and Farijong, which is where he's going to be. So let's read part of a letter that HPB wrote to Sinnett around the same time.
He doesn't mean disappearing from correspondence forever, just maybe temporarily.
Right.
Okay.
Because we're going to find out here. This was a letter that Sinnett received around September 19th, 1882. And it came from HPB, who was in Bombay. My dear friends, Mrs. and Mr. Sinnett. And I think she addressed it first to Mrs. Sinnett because she received a letter from her inviting her to come visit them in Allahabad. I am afraid you will have soon to bid me goodbye. Whether to heaven or hell, don't know. This time I have it well and good. Bright's disease of the kidneys, and the whole blood turned into water with ulcers breaking out in the most unexpected and less explored spots, blood or whatever it may be forming into bags a la kangaroo and other pretty extras and et ceteras. She gets a little carried away sometimes.
A la kangaroo. Like
Pouches.
Marsupials.
Yes.
That's hilarious.
She is really funny in some of her expressions.
And she's probably deadpan when she's thinking about these things.
Yeah.
She doesn't smile.
Yeah.
It's funny.
She has quite a delivery. She should be on stage. This, all primo, using Latin words, brought by Bombay dampness and heat, and segundo, by fretting and bothering.
Segundo's not Latin, though.
Secundo, I should say.
Oh, okay.
Secundo. Second, secundo, by fretting and bothering. I have become so stupidly nervous that the unexpected tread of Babula's naked foot near me makes me start with the most violent palpitations of the heart.
She's very articulate, too. My
Yes, she is. She describes things so well that it's like you can see a visual of it. And Babula is her devoted servant who was quite young. I think he was only about 15 when they arrived in Bombay. He was hired almost immediately when they first arrived, and he stayed with her for years and years, even went to Europe with her. And he spoke several different languages. He was very, very articulate and very intelligent. Dudley says, and Dudley was her doctor, I forced him to tell me this, that I can last a year or two and perhaps but a few days, for I can kick the bucket at any time in consequence of an emotion. Ye lords of creation, of such emotions I have 20 a day. How can I last then? I give all the business over to Subarao. In December or January, we shift our headquarters to Madras, and so how can I come to Allahabad? Boss wants me to prepare and go somewhere for a month or so toward the end of September. Boss being Morya. He sent a chela here, Gargya Deva from Nilgiri Hills, and he is to take me off, where I don't know, but of course somewhere in the Himalayas. Boss is fearfully mad with Hume. He says he has spoilt all his work. And remember, K.H. said that Morya and the Mahatma Chohan were pretty much done with him. But really, miserable as I was and shocked over his stupid and bumptious, as you say, letter, I was sick for weeks before, and so it is not Hume who did all the mischief, but Morya is nevertheless black as night over him. Poor Alcott, what will he do without me? Yes, I wish I could see you once more, and dear Mrs. Gordon and my old Colonel Gordon, whose grandmother I may meet in some of the lower hells whither I will go, unless I am picked up by them, meaning the Mahatmas, and made to stick in Tibet. Well, goodbye all. If I go before seeing you, do not think of me too much as an impostor, for I swear I told you the truth, however much I may have concealed of it from you. I hope Mrs. Gordon will not dishonor by evoking me with some medium. Let her rest assured that it will never be my spirit nor anything of me, not even my shell, since this is gone long ago. Yours in life yet, HPB. So you can tell that one wasn't written in Chela mode. She sometimes writes in HPB mode, which is hilarious and quite graphic. And then, as we've seen before, when she's on task and speaking as a Chela, it is totally different. And you can spot it from a mile away. Let's get back to our correspondence, letter number 87.
I guess it would stand to reason that when she's also being spoken through secret doctrine, Isis unveiled, it's different again. You can clearly see how everything is different.
Yes, I was reading last night a letter that she wrote to her aunt in Odessa in 1875, where she was describing the process of how they speak through her. And then she went on to reveal much of the doctrine. And I'm like, holy Toledo, this is like right out of The Secret Doctrine or Isis Unveiled, either one. Because you can tell when the Mahatmas are speaking through her. And it's quite interesting. The book is called Letters of H.P. Blavatsky, and I think it goes from 1861. Well, it's the first volume of the letters, and there's a second volume that is coming out in a few months, and I can't wait to get that one too.
Wow.
Yeah, Michael Gomes is editing that one. John Algeo was the editor for the first volume, and Michael Gomes is editing the second volume, or at least parts of it. All right. Letter number 87, also received in September 1882.
It is positively distressing to find oneself so systematically misunderstood, one's intentions misconceived, and the whole plan imperiled by this endless rushing. Are we never to be granted any credit for knowing what we are about, or allowed the benefit of the doubt in the absence of any reasonable proof and claims that we have determined to bar the progress of the Theosophical Society?
And by rushing, he's pointing out that they want an information dump. Just give us the information. Stop holding back. And that isn't how these teachings are ever revealed. It's a little bit at a time. And then give people time to assimilate that. They think that they can just bring a dump truck and dump the whole load and they will sort it all out. It does not work that way.
Mr. Hume maintains that he does not say KH or any brother is wrong, yet every line of his numerous letters to myself and HPB breathes the spirit of complaint and bitter accusation. I tell you, my good friend, he will never be satisfied, do what we may. And this is again referring to the fact that even if they did give the information dump, even if they did back up the dump truck and unload every secret they have, they would still want something else or not believe it or say, this is not real, you made it up just to satisfy us. Or...
We learned this in the very first letter that they received from KH way back in 1880. He said, we cannot reveal all of this to the Western world in one go, because no matter what we do, they would find fault with it. We could transmit the entire newspaper that you print today in Allahabad to London that very same day, and they still would not believe it.
Many of you probably know people like that too, who always accuse you and always blame others. And then even if you did act perfectly, every jot and tittle was perfect. We probably know people, I do. I know people like that who would still find something, even if you are perfect, because that's just the way they are. They just are not satisfied.
And we have to remember that people are so entrenched in their long-held beliefs, and they're not made out of reasoning. They're made out of emotions. Anything that is decided based on emotions, you can't counter with reasoning. It's not going to make any difference to those people.
Yeah. And since we can't flood the world with doctrine at the risk of drowning them, for it has to be given out bit by bit like a powerful tonic which can kill as well as cure, the result will be a reaction in that insatiable craving of his, and then, well, you yourself know the consequences. This is amazing. The powerful tonic, like the breath work, for example, in yoga, we talk about how the breath is so powerful. Obviously, we need the breath to live. We need to breathe deeply to live. However, can you breathe too much? Sure you can. You can hyperventilate and cause yourself to pass out. And we know people who have done such extreme breath practices that they can cause themselves permanent psychological damage or physical damage. A powerful tonic that can hurt as well as heal. kill as well as enhance. Makes sense to me.
And that's why they are so careful with these teachings. They are only released to those individuals who merit them. The adept is not created by instruction. The adept is 100% self-made. You have to transform yourself into an adept, and that takes many lifetimes.
There's a lot of wisdom in that. The teacher is there to guide and to help, but the practice, the work, it has to be our own. My gosh, that's powerful. Enclosed are 2 letters written and addressed to HPB, but aimed at myself. Well, we can do no better for the present. The society will never perish as an institution, although branches and individuals in it may. Lately, I have done more to humor him than I have ever done for you, and you may judge of the situation in the chaotic but mostly reasonable remarks that HPB addresses today to Mr. Hume. We must be left to judge for ourselves and be permitted to be the best judges. Everything will be explained and given out in good time if we are just allowed to do it our own way. Otherwise, better give up the eclectic. I had volumes from him during the past week. I send you a few notes through her. Keep this confidential. Yours, K.H.
All right, so Hume is just bombarding them with letters, and we're actually going to get some information now that was addressed specifically to Mr. Hume, because he is proposing to write a long T-segment article about the Mahatma's view on God. So guess what the next letter is? The infamous God letter.
We've been alluding to this for a while.
Yes.
God, what a sticky topic.
This is actually groundbreaking. It's really, really good. And there's reason to pay really strict attention to this and watch this part of the sessions again and again, especially for those who were brought up in the Christian tradition and philosophy. It will change probably at least part, if not everything, that you know about your own religion. We'll see. We'll see how far it changes individuals. It has changed me, I'll just tell you that. So this is letter 88, received at Shimla in September 1882. And it's titled Notes by K.H. on a preliminary chapter that he intended to write, headed God, by Hume, and intended to preface an exposition of occult philosophy, an abridged version of occult philosophy, obviously.
Now, where is Hume going to publish this?
In the Theosophist.
Okay.
Or he may have been intending to do it as a series of pamphlets, because he did a few things that way. But I think he also intended that it would be produced as a series in the Theosophist. Now, we don't have the original because Hume received the original. But when he did receive it, Sinnett carefully transcribed it, made a copy of it for himself, and thanked somebody that he did.
Now, did K.H. write his own letter?
Yes.
Okay, so he's not notating another document. He's not putting notes on something.
This is K.H.'s
own letter
and writing.
He had seen what Hume was writing.
Hume had sent it to him, asking for his input on it.
Which is, I had volumes from him during the past week.
So now we get K.H.'s views on God and other topics.
Now, is K.H. intending for Sinnett?
Oh, yes, it's for both of them.
He sent it to Hume. And Sinnett made the copy and he kept it. Good. Here we go. Our philosophy doesn't believe in a God, and neither do we. And certainly not in one whose pronoun requires a capital H. That's the first sentence in the thing.
Yeah, and when he says we don't believe in a God, he's obviously referring to the Western God, who is anthropomorphic, who represents many human qualities, including some of the worst: anger, resentment, ego.
But also embodies all the omnis.
Yes.
The omnipotence,
right,
omnipresence,
Exactly. And he's going to address exactly that. So he's like, we do not believe in a God that you imagine to be a God.
That's the first sentence. Our philosophy falls under the definition of Hobbes.
All right. So
Hobbes.
Who is Hobbes? You know Hobbes, right?
Yeah, it's like
Calvin and Hobbes.
The Hobbit. No, he's a hobbit.
He's a tiger,
Yeah.
Calvin and Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes lived from 1588 to 1679. Now, we need to point out that the Age of Enlightenment, when people became more enlightened because they went from a strictly religious way of philosophy to the beginnings of something a little more scientific. So that is considered to have taken place over about 150 years, from 1685 to 1815. So after the Middle Ages, when darkness reigned as far as intellectual pursuits, then came this Age of Enlightenment. And Thomas Hobbes was one of the people who ushered that period in. He was an English philosopher and scientist. He believed that God was material, that it wasn't this anthropomorphic deity in the sky somewhere so much, but that he was actually a physical being, just like the rest of us. He said that we can understand that he exists, but to understand his nature and much more than that, we couldn't possibly understand it. It actually makes some sense. He believed that God originated out of fear, which is true. He believed that human sovereigns were more reasonable than having faith in this God that we can't really understand. So he disapproved of most religions, including Christianity. So KH is saying we generally go along with this guy Hobbes. And he's going to point out a few other philosophers that he at least partially agreed with.
Interesting. One other quick note on what we're referring to as the Age of Enlightenment. This is not necessarily an astrological cycle, but it relates to the yugas, which we've talked about before. The yugas generally relate to long periods of lightness and darkness, then transitionary periods. But societies like this planet's, this main society that we're a part of, does go through cycles as well. Terry mentioned the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages, which could relate to the Kali Yuga. And then the Satya Yuga is the relative Age of Enlightenment. So a smaller cycle within the grander cycles of the precession of the equinox and rise and fall of all life, basically. It relates to the septenary relationship, but that's just for a different discussion, but it does relate to the cycles of nature.
Yes, and it's very important to keep in mind just what Paul said, that we have cycles within cycles within cycles, and all of them follow the same general pattern. If you can imagine, for example, an orrery, a very elaborate orrery, it's amazing because you can see these in a physical manner, cycles within cycles within cycles.
The moon revolves around the earth revolves around the sun is revolving in the galaxy, which we don't think of, and then the galaxies are moving, and then the universe is one of many universes, if you believe in that. I mean, so it's all doing something.
And as far as we know, the universe has no end. So, yeah, take that into account.
All right. It is preeminently the science of effects by their causes, and causes by their effects. And since it is also the science of things deduced from first principle, as Bacon defines it, before we admit any such principle, we must know it, and we have no right to even admit its possibility. So we have another philosopher here.
There we go. Sir Francis Bacon.
Oh, isn't it Kevin? No.
Yeah, it's Kevin's ancient ancestor who lived 1561 to 1626, English philosopher and statesman. He believed in inductive reasoning.
As opposed to deductive?
Yeah, well, I guess. And I'm not sure exactly how that inductive and deductive are different. I didn't research that. He also believes in the empirical method. Basically, he was the one who came up with the scientific method. You have to be able to demonstrate something and
Reproduce it,
and others have to be able to reproduce it. It has to be reasonable. And you have to show that one thing causes the other. You can't just take a wild guess or a belief in something that, well, God must have created this because we can't imagine anything else that would have. So he was very instrumental in ushering in this Age of Enlightenment too, as far as science having much more importance in people's lives than before.
Prior to this, it was much more mythological and rituals and tradition based. Oh, there's a big wolf in the sky that eats the crops if you're bad or something. And it kind of stories and myths. But now we're looking more into actual scientific reasons for the crops failing, not that the wolf in the sky got mad at you because you didn't sacrifice enough lambs or something.
Yeah, exactly. He also predicted the scientific revolution. So that's the next philosopher that they at least partially agree with.
We have Hobbes and Bacon. Your whole explanation is based on one solitary admission made simply for argument's sake in October 1881.
And if you remember, in October 1881, KH was in Samadhi.
Oh.
So this was the period when Morya was teaching the two Englishmen their ancient wisdom teachings as far as possible. And so this teaching would have come from Morya.
You were told that our knowledge was limited to our solar system, and therefore, as philosophers who desire to remain worthy of the name, we could neither deny nor affirm the existence of what you termed a supreme, omnipotent, intelligent being of some sort beyond the limits of that solar system.
Now, this is very, very important. Morya told them, we know what takes place within our solar system. We can't tell you about things outside of our solar system. We are limited by the range of our expertise. Just like a scientist is not going to go outside his area of expertise and say, well, also this and this and this,
Claim to
when he has never studied it. Mm-hmm. So they made, and especially Hume, certain conclusions based on that were more or less derogatory. But what he's saying here, KH, is that we base everything on knowledge, not on speculation. This is information that we have been able to verify for ourselves. It has also been verified by all of our superiors who know even more than we do, but we limit what we discuss to what we actually know personally.
One piece of information that we can infer and read between the lines is the process of how we're supposed to understand these things that we can share. And you may have inferred it also, is that when he says the solar system, it's not just the physical solar system. There are other dimensions involved here. Like when KH was in Samadhi, we mentioned that we probably used the language such as he was traveling through space and time, he was moving. We probably used words and verbiage that implied he was somewhere far, far away, perhaps, but that might not have been outside the physical limits of our solar system, just interdimensionally, different planes of existence, but most likely still within, maybe without, we don't know. But when he says solar system, remember, there's more to the world than just the planets that you see, that we see, and that telescopes can detect. So please keep that in mind.
And along the same lines, it is still very possible that KH did travel interstellar space and that he had a guide who knows interstellar space and showed him various different things.
It's like a big Satori. He's being touched or shown something.
Exactly. And he is still not an expert in it, so he can't say, I'm an expert in interstellar space. He can't say, I'm an expert on our galaxy. He can't say, I'm an expert on our solar system, though.
We need to use our own faculties of discernment when he says beyond the limits of that solar system. Those are words in black and white. we are being charged with the task of understanding that at a deeper level, is all we're saying.
Mm-hmm.
All right, continuing along. But if such an existence, meaning our Western view of God, is not absolutely impossible, yet unless the uniformity of nature's laws breaks at those limits, we maintain that it is highly improbable.
Okay. So again, using reasoning,
Yeah.
we can't say 100%, but it doesn't seem logical that all of a sudden the laws would all change outside of our solar
Just like
system.
that teapot thing. You can't prove that there's not a God, but he's saying that it is highly improbable.
So we still have to use logic and reason.
Nevertheless, we deny most emphatically the position of agnosticism as regards the solar system. Now, for those of us who aren't familiar with the term agnosticism, that means the belief that a higher power can't be known. So atheism is the belief that there's no God. Atheist, no God. Agnostic means you just don't even try. We don't know. We don't want to explore it, right?
More or less, yeah.
Our doctrine knows no compromises. It either affirms or denies, for it never teaches anything but that which it knows to be truth.
Exactly. And they have, as I said, superiors who have more information than they do. And so they trust that information, but they're still not going to give it out as their own. They're only going to teach what they actually know.
When he says our doctrine either affirms or denies, well, if there's something that they don't know, there's a third thing there. They'll say that they don't know.
Right, exactly. And they will say that it's outside our area of expertise.
Just like he said earlier about whatever's outside the solar system, but it's funny how he doesn't say that again here.
Right.
Our doctrine either affirms or denies, or we say we don't know.
Right. But when it comes to saying what they know about the truth.
Got it. Therefore, we deny God both as philosophers and as Buddhists. Wow, so he's saying that he's of the Buddhist faith?
Oh, yes, absolutely. They are Tibetan Buddhist lamas. Absolutely, they are.
Huh. We know there are planetary and other spiritual lives, and we know that in our system there is no such thing as God, either personal or impersonal.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. But keep reading.
Para Brahm is not a God, but absolute immutable law, and Ishvara is the effect of avidya and maya, ignorance based upon the great delusion. That is a huge sentence. We need to unpack that a little bit. Para Brahm, let's break that into two. Brahma does relate to God the Father in the Hindu Trimurti or Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Para Brahm is the highest version of God the Father,
I guess.
One way to say the overarching absolute, but they're saying Para Brahm is not a God, but absolute immutable law. Sometimes we call that the absolute, the potential for creation, which is not anthropomorphic. It's not a person.
No, and remember in a previous letter, he very plainly stated, Para Brahm plus Maya equals Ishvara.
Okay, Ishvara is a word that we hear a lot in the Yoga Sutras, which relates to, again, this idea of the absolute potential or substratum for creation, but it's not a personified God at all.
You could almost say it's nature as the overriding power of law in the universe.
My understanding personally, and it may be incorrect, is that Ishvara and Para Brahm are the same thing, just said in different words. But we're learning here that when you add illusion, which is either Maya or avidya, illusion or misunderstanding. Vidya is knowledge, avidya is the opposite, and Maya is the same thing, illusion. When you add that to the idea of Para Brahm, we get Ishvara. I don't understand that, but maybe you can explain that.
I think this may help to clarify. Para Brahm, I take it to be the sense of the absolute.
During the rest
So
period.
Parabrahm is that.
Okay.
But as soon as a new Manvantara starts, then you introduce again Maya and Avidya.
Because there's a physical incarnation.
And now Ishvara comes into the picture. Okay.
So whenever there's a physical universe, physicality is Maya because it's not the pure truth. Anytime there's a physical world, a physical universe, that is less true than Parabrahm, which could be said to be a veil, Mayic or less than pure existence, because purity is non-existence, pure purity.
It's
Wow.
potential, nothing
my
more than potential existence.
So the same kind of absolute could be called Parabrahm during the resting period where there's no physical universe, no Big Bang. But when it dissolves again after a whole Manvantara, the universe dissolves for a rest, for nighttime, for sleep, for rest.
Well, that's Parabrahm.
Oh yeah, and then Parabrahm, and then when it's in existence, it's Ishvara.
That's how I understand it.
Wow.
But again, this is one of those concepts that you have to contemplate.
Yes.
It's not going to be understood in words or in writing.
That is powerful. The word God was invented to designate the unknown cause of those effects which man has either admired or feared without understanding them. And since we claim and are able to prove what we claim, that is the knowledge of those causes, we are in a position to maintain that there is no God or gods behind them.
Okay. So he's going to talk a little bit more about the derivation of the belief in God or gods. And whether you have one God or numerous gods, it doesn't matter. They are, for most people, a deity that must be placated or
Satisfied or appeased.
satisfied because they have power over things that affect you. And so you do not want to disrespect those guys. So if you can plead with them to get favors, then maybe you can do that. He's saying they don't believe in any God that can do something like that. He's saying that gods were basically created out of fear.
For that reason and for things that we don't understand. For a reason behind stuff that is mysterious.
Yes, exactly. Imagine primitive people when they see
An earthquake or a volcano
or
famine. Comet.
an eclipse or
yeah,
a
yeah.
comet, things in the skies that happen, and they're like, oh my God, there has to be a reason for it. So they invented a reason. It isn't based on scientific information.
If it's a phenomenon that's unpleasant, God is unhappy with them and they need to fix whatever. They'll sacrifice some more lambs or something like that to appease. But if it's a pleasant, like if the harvest was good, the gods were smiling upon them. They did something to appease the god.
Yes, exactly. And that's exactly how it came about.
Yeah. Wow, this is good stuff. Wow. The idea of God is not an innate, but an acquired notion. That's also fascinating. Most people don't think about how the concept of God evolved and what our own concept of God even is. We implore you to figure out what you really believe God is. Are you just believing what church tells you? Or what is God to you? This is important.
And it comes from your social realm.
Totally.
The
For
people
sure.
around you, even in these primitive tribes,
Yeah.
most of them like, what made that? So one of them, who was the alpha, says, well, obviously it's a God who is not very happy with us. So we need to figure out what we're doing wrong or what you're doing wrong.
I didn't even finish that sentence. I got excited again. The idea of God is not an innate, but an acquired notion. And we have just one thing in common with theologies. We reveal the infinite.
Meaning that's our intention. Theologies claim to reveal the infinite, but what proof do they have?
But while we assign duration and motion, as well as material, natural, reasonable, and known causes known to us, to all the phenomena that proceed from the infinite and limitless space, the theists assign spiritual, supernatural, unreasonable, and unknown causes to the phenomena. This is a little bit strange the way he's saying it, because it most certainly is supernatural and spiritual.
I had to spend an hour trying to sort out this one sentence. He was comparing the two, and I had to rearrange parts of the sentence, and it is very difficult no matter what you do. So basically what he's saying is that while the theists assign spiritual, supernatural, unreasonable, and unknown causes to the phenomena around them, we assign duration and motion. We assign material rather than spiritual, natural rather than supernatural, and reasonable rather than unreasonable causes. So it is a very difficult sentence.
The God of the theologians is simply an imaginary power. I can already hear the counter-argument. Well, the masters are imaginary, and the Chohans are imaginary, and the Buddha himself is imaginary. And sure, if you don't know...
And they would not deny that. Most people would be perfectly reasonable to assume that they are imaginary. But
chakras are imaginary.
What's the difference? They don't say, trust us. They say, fine, if it doesn't seem to make any sense, don't worry yourself about it. If what we say does make sense, put it into practice in your life for a while at least. See whether or not you get any results. If you still don't get results, no harm, no foul. But if you do, then let's continue.
And if you're really hearing what Terry is saying with that, it's very different than the way other religions work. Other religions do not say that. They might imply that this will help your life if you do these things, but what else do they say? They say if you don't do those things, there's a consequence.
You're going to really regret it. That sounds like a bully to me, but don't take my word for it.
The God of the theologians is simply an imaginary power, a power which has never yet manifested itself. And we're waiting, right? We're waiting for the second coming, right? Our chief aim is to deliver humanity of this nightmare.
Yes, it is a nightmare.
Wow.
People living in fear.
You've heard the term God-fearing.
Yeah.
It's a God-fearing man. Well, why should anyone fear God?
Yeah.
What the heck is that all about?
I agree.
Our chief aim is to deliver humanity of this nightmare, to teach man virtue for its own sake, and to live life relying on himself instead of leaning on a theological crutch that, for countless ages, was the direct cause of nearly all human misery. And that is easily proved from history, recalling that almost every single war that's ever been fought is over religious reasons.
In the past, yes, and for ideological reasons or greed or lust for power. Yeah, all of them.
We got to read that sentence again. Our chief aim is to deliver humanity of this nightmare, to teach man virtue for its own sake, and to live life relying on himself. Well, people don't want that sometimes, but that's what yoga philosophy teaches us. We have the power. Relying on himself instead of leaning on a theological crutch that, for countless ages, was the direct cause of nearly all human misery. Wow.
And what do a lot of religious people say about people who are not believers? Well, how would you have any ethics without religion? And our response is, if it's only your religion that prevents you from murdering and raping and stealing from people, I don't think very highly of your religion. I don't think very highly of you is what it really means.
If you can't feel
do you really not have that within you?
Yeah.
Is it only someone threatening you that keeps you from murdering and committing violence towards somebody?
You can very easily feel what's right and what's wrong. You can easily feel what hurts others and what doesn't hurt others.
You would think so, but the longer I live, the more I realized that we're surrounded by people who are severely lacking in ethics and personal morals, regardless of their beliefs. It's more than a little frightening.
Okay, continuing along, we could be called pantheistic. which means multiple gods, could be called pantheistic, but never agnostic, meaning we do have a belief. We do have a theory, a doctrine, a system, rather.
Yes, we do. And they do. And remember in a letter quite a long time ago, he said, we, meaning the Mahatmas, are not gods, and our chiefs, they hope. Meaning, and he'll discuss this later, there are beings that we could consider God. Let's figure out which ones those beings are and which ones they aren't.
If people are willing to regard our one life, immutable and unconscious in its eternity, as God, they may do so and thus retain one more incorrect term. But then they will have to say, along with Spinoza, there's another philosopher, that there is no other substance than God. Okay, I've got to unpack that one. If people are willing to regard our one life, now he's probably referring to the absolute again.
Right.
Whatever we call that, the unmanifest being, as Eckhart Tolle says.
The spiritual something that we all are part
backdrop of the physical world, whatever the unifying entity, foundation is behind the physical world. If people are willing to regard that in its eternity as God, they may do so. But it doesn't have a face. There's no man. It's not a guy who's jealous or requiring sacrificial practices. That's why he's saying you can do that and retain an incorrect term. But then you'll have to say, along with Spinoza, that there's no other substance than God. Okay, we need to figure that out. So who's Spinoza?
I didn't look him up specifically, but he is a philosopher who had very similar ideas. But let's see. He had, Spinoza, the idea that there would be no other substance than God.
And that's actually what the masters, they've never said it that way before, but that is actually true because nature is all one at the level of this absolute internally. The only reason why people and living things seem separated is to gain experience and have interactions. But if you define God as this substratum, this being, this beingness, this absolute, everything is one, and nothing is not God. So the master KH is saying that if you do regard that highest thing we're talking about as God, you have to also say that there's nothing that's not God, and that's a problem for many religious people. I'm God, you're God, the flower's God, this computer's God, the camera's God.
And it doesn't give you anything to better your life with. It doesn't give you any philosophy to work with.
Mm-hmm. That's actually interesting. It's tough to understand that, but I see what he's getting at. If you do believe that the highest thing that we think is there is God, you have to also think that everything manifested from that is also God, which most religions will not. Who but a theologian nursed on mystery and the most absurd supernaturalism can imagine a self-existent being who is infinite, omnipresent, and outside the manifested boundless universe? That's funny.
And this is the problem, because in most religions that believe in a creator, you have the creator and you have the universe he created. Mm-hmm. Two things. How do you have something that is all-encompassing? How can he be the creator and be his creation?
Or not be his creation, rather. Is that,
exactly, yeah. or however you want to say it. It boggles the mind, either way you look at it.
It does boggle the mind. The word infinite is simply a negative, which excludes the idea of bounds. It is evident that a being who is independent and omnipresent cannot be limited by anything which is outside of himself. And there can be nothing exterior to himself, not even a vacuum. So then, where is there room for matter for that manifested universe, even if it's limited? Oh my
If you
gosh.
are the unlimited, how can there be something other than that? So, yeah, again, it boggles the mind.
The answer might be, well, we can't understand that.
And that's exactly what religious people say. Well, it's a mystery. And they resort to that quite often. But they either say, we know this or we don't know this, and they don't claim to believe in a mystery that they can't even discuss.
Yet, theists claim that their God penetrates matter, but is not himself matter. When we speak of our one life, we also say that it penetrates, in fact, is the very essence of every atom of matter, and that therefore it not only relates to matter, but has all its properties, hence is matter itself. Last year you kept asking, how can intelligence emanate from non-intelligence? How could a highly intelligent human, the crown of reason, be evolved out of blind, unintelligent law? But once we reason along that line, I may ask in my turn, how could congenital idiots, non-reasoning animals, and the rest of creation have been created by or evolved from absolute wisdom, if the latter is a thinking, intelligent being, the author and ruler of the universe? How, says Dr. Clarke in his examination of the proof of the existence of divinity, God who hath made the eye, shall he not see? God who hath made the ear, shall not hear? But according to this mode of reasoning, they would have to admit that in creating an idiot, God is an idiot, that he who made so many irrational beings, so many physical and moral monsters, must be an irrational being.
And here he's kind of going on a tangent on his reasoning.
Do we know who Dr. Clarke is?
Dr. Clarke, let's see if we know anything. Samuel Clarke, 1675 to 1729, was an English philosopher and an Anglican cleric. He believed that the universe could come into existence without a cause, and he tried to combine science and religion, but didn't succeed very well.
So he was an Anglican, so a church person, but he's also questioning how this process works, yeah?
Right. And there were a few clerics who did the same thing. Even though they were clergy, they didn't just go along with, well, trust us, believe us. They wanted reasons. And so they were questioning, and they were often disparaged by the regular clergy.
Okay, so there's a short break here, maybe a different paragraph before he begins with the next thought. He says, KH says, we are not Advaitis, which is religious.
Well, remember he pointed out before that Subbarao was an Advaiti. And he said, our philosophy is exactly the same. We are Tibetan Buddhists. He is an Advaiti. We have no differences in our philosophy except for the terms that are used for it.
We are not Advaitis, but our teaching respecting the one life is identical with that of the Advaiti with regard to para Brahm. And no true philosophically trained Advaiti will ever call himself an agnostic, for he knows that he is para Brahm and identical in every respect with the universal life and soul. The macrocosm is the microcosm, and he knows that there is no God apart from himself, no creator, as well as no being. Having found gnosis, which means what? Knowledge, true knowledge? We cannot turn our backs on it and become agnostics. Okay.
Yeah.
Gnosis with a G, gnosis. Gnosis is the opposite of agnostic.
Right.
Amazing. Were we to admit that even the highest Dhyan Chohans are liable to err under a delusion, then there would be no reality for us, and the occult sciences would be as great a chimera as that God.
So an imaginary creature.
He's saying that the Dhyan Chohans never make an error?
Yes, the Dhyan Chohans are the highest beings in the universe. And remember, he said universal mind is the sum total of the wisdom, knowledge, experience of the Dhyan Chohans. Mm-hmm. So they are nature itself in a real sense.
Mm-hmm. If there is absurdity in denying that which we do not know, it is even more absurd to assign unknown laws to it.
Yeah. Again, wow. They're not going to speculate on things. They teach what they know.
Wow. According to logic, nothing is that of which everything can be denied and nothing can be affirmed.
Yes.
The idea, therefore, of either a finite or infinite nothing is a contradiction in terms.
Yeah. Infinite and nothing are two terms that you can't say anything about them. You can only say things that are what they are not.
The idea, therefore, of either a finite or infinite nothing is a contradiction in terms. And yet, according to theologians, God, the self-existent being, is a most simple, unchangeable, incorruptible being without parts, motion, divisibility, or any other such properties that we find in matter, because all such things so plainly and necessarily imply finiteness in their very notion and are utterly inconsistent with complete infinity.
Yes, people love to say that God is unchangeable. He is the same forever. And yet, as he will point out, the Bible disproves this on almost every page. He is very fickle, if you believe everything that's written in the Bible. He's vengeful. He's illogical sometimes. So I don't know.
Could the counter-argument be that that's all Old Testament stuff? The New Testament, he's not that?
And the New Testament isn't also based on the Old Testament? Why even have the Old Testament? Throw it out and only have the New Testament.
Therefore, the God here offered to the adoration of the 19th century lacks every quality upon which man's mind is capable of making any judgment.
Going back to the topic of the Old Testament, I found out just last night, reading a letter of HPB, that she said, and I had to look it up, and she is absolutely right, the oldest complete version in Hebrew of the Old Testament is how old, do you think? 1,000 years old. That's the oldest, around 1010 AD.
Of the Old Testament?
Of the Old Testament. 1,000 years.
Wait, it's newer than the New Testament?
Yes. As far as the existing oldest copy of it. You would think that they had copies from 3,000 years ago or at least 2,000 years ago. No.
So what do we think that means?
It means that they had every possibility of rewriting it in the meantime. If it was rewritten from someone's knowledge, if those older copies got lost, then they can make it whatever they want it.
Why would they make the Old Testament what it is, though? It's not great. It doesn't put God in a good light.
Their entire religion is based on that and the New Testament. It's the same God is what they say. I don't see that. I see a very vindictive, evil God in the Old Testament, but don't take my word for it.
What is this, in fact, but a being of whom they can affirm nothing, but that which can be instantly contradicted? Their own Bible, in the book of Revelation, destroys all the moral perceptions they heap upon him, unless, indeed, they call those qualities perfections that every other man's reason and common sense call imperfections, odious vices and brutal wickedness.
And that is in the New Testament, the very last book, the book of Revelation by John. And it describes what's going to happen when Jesus comes back and destroys the earth. Yeah, pretty brutal. Read it. Read it.
He who reads our Buddhist scriptures, written for the superstitious masses, will fail to find in them a demon so vindictive and unjust, so cruel and so stupid as the celestial tyrant upon whom Christians prodigally lavish their servile worship, and on whom their theologians heap those perfections that are contradicted on every page of their Bible.
Yes.
Wow, KH is letting it rip.
Yes, and this is what they teach. Fear God, because he is going to get his revenge at the end of the world. Those people who do not believe in him and do not follow his word, they are going to be destroyed. They're going to hell, and they're going to burn for eternity in hell.
This is jarring to read. My goodness.
Yes, very stark differences between their teachings and the teachings of the religions that are most powerful in the world today. If you take the Christian, the Muslim, and the Hindu religions, they cover the majority, I would guess, of mankind. And we'll see, we'll get more of this teaching in our next session. We will cover the universal mind, matter, more about God, and their ideas on evil, which is very, very interesting. So stay tuned. We will have more information on this in our upcoming session, number 51.
Wow. That was pretty intense.
So thank you again for following along, and we appreciate all of your views.